Season 2, Episode 4 of the Catch Up by Salesfire. This week we're joined by John Cave from Shoptimised, chatting all about the struggles of growing a business in the northeast of England, as well as talking about Shoptimised's meteoric rise from being an idea in John's head 2 years ago to now being one of the market leaders in feed optimization. It's a really interesting chat, talking, as I say, all things about growing business struggles, John's experience in paid advertising on the web, and basically learning about how he thinks the future will go in terms of Google versus Amazon. Let's get straight to it then. So, how's it been for you, John? Are you all right?
Yeah, things have been obviously strange, but I think they've normalised fairly quickly. Kind of once March was out of the way, things just got really, really busy.
Mm-hmm. No, I think as well, the reason why I was quite keen to speak on yourself as well, obviously we've met at a couple of events, we've had a bit of a chat here and there, there's been a bit of back and forth, and obviously you're quite a big figure in like the northeast digital side of things. I don't know if that's...
I wouldn't say that, but
that's not what I've heard from other people. Like, every conversation I have, John Cave gets thrown around, so there you are.
Yeah, none of it's true.
The allegations are fake. Yeah, but as I say, so I wanted to basically have a quick conversation with you, talk through a couple of bits and bobs, because obviously when we'd spoken previously, your experience, you started, I believe, in e-commerce. Was it at Dawson and Sanderson many moons ago?
Trying to think, how far back was it really? It was probably, well, a bit further back than that. So I started in paid search. Have you guys come across a company called Fairstone, which are based up in Bolden, sort of the big IFA network? Yeah, so I was at Fairstone when it was founded. It was a little company, and I used to be the sales manager for the inbound and outbound call center. And at that point, we were paying an agency. It was an agency down in London called Greenlight. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those guys, but we were paying that agency about £5,000 to £6,000 a month to manage the paid search to generate leads. And my boss at the time just asked me to have a look at it and take a stab and see if we could do it better and save on that money. And we did. And sort of that's where I learned how to do it. And then I jumped out of there, joined a travel agency, which was a big travel agency at the time online called Freedom Direct.
Mm-hmm.
And Freedom Direct, 6 months after I joined them, went under. Issues around an ATOL license. But luckily, Hayes Travel decided to buy them. Whether Hayes Travel actually enjoyed buying that whole process or not, I'm not sure. But I went to Hayes Travel as part of that and was their online marketing manager before defecting to Dawson and Sanderson.
Joining the dark side and moving over.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And then spent a good 3 years at Dawson and Sanderson, which is a really nice company to work for. They're kind of their whole business mantra is sort of like, we're all right if you're all right. Are you all right? I'm all right. Like, that's good. Yeah, everything's great. They're sort of really nice people to work for. It was a family-run business at the time. I'm not sure the family are that heavily involved in it now, and then eventually went to MediaWorks, which was my first taste of agency life.
Yeah. How long ago was that then? The MediaWorks move?
Oh, how long ago was that? Maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago now. I went into MediaWorks with a man. When I went there, MediaWorks was just an SEO agency. So my mandate was to go in and build a paid search department and sort of de-risk them from being completely focused on SEO and build that department up, which I was there for about 18 months. We built that to about 50 clients, had a team of 5 there. It was going really well. It was, agency life is hard work. It's very, very fast paced. Yeah, when you're building something out, and MediaWorks was sort of one of the bigger agencies, and to be fair, still is one of the bigger agencies in the Northeast, and has a reputation for its size, and it's gone past at least 10 years now that it's been running, and lots of other subsidiary agencies have spun off when people have left them and things like that. But yeah, sort of MediaWorks was a really good education. It was a really good grounding. It was nice to see how agency life worked. I think there's fair to say that we had a team that were working very, very hard. And I guess that's where I got my first life experience of the work-life balance. So when we were at MediaWorks, we're sort of, as head of PPC, you're in charge of the team, you were in charge of accounts, you were needed to go on pitches, so you had to travel around the country at the same time. So you were doing a lot of your pitch work during the day, a lot of your client and pitch writing on the train, and then a lot of account management on a night time. And that's when I kind of first had my first real health issues. So I was in a meeting room at MediaWorks, just trying to get some quiet time, just trying to do some work, and then I forgot where I was. I forgot what I was doing. I could figure out I was on a computer, but I couldn't remember how to save what I was doing anymore. I can't remember getting home from that point. But when I did get home, my wife took us to hospital, and they initially thought I'd had a stroke, and ended up being kept in hospital with the ink test going through your brain, the MRI scans for about 5 days, and it ended up just being severe exhaustion and burnout, just sort of living on coffee, working on fumes, just trying to get everything done. And that I'm not suggesting that was sort of MediaWorks' fault or anything like that. That was my decision to try and work that hard and try and take on as much as I possibly could. And do it. And sort of, and in fairness to MediaWorks, when that happened, they were very, very supportive. And they looked after me. They gave me the time, and they brought me back comfortably and casually. And so there was no issues, or there was no blame from my part in MediaWorks. So that was a choice that I'd made. But after that, that kind of did sort of make me readdress sort of that work-life balance. And probably about 6 months after that, I left MediaWorks and joined a company called Very Cheap Holidays as digital director. And the guys who were running Very Cheap Holidays were the guys who had originally ran Freedom Direct. Great people to work for. I would kind of class Martin Jones as probably as something of a mentor for me. He's spent a lot of time. He helped me quite a lot. But I think one of the things going from that really fast-paced agency world back in-house, I found the pace of change, it slowed quite a lot.
That was going to be my question, to be fair, because you hear it where, as you say there, like a lot of people do the reverse and they go from agency to retailer or to online merchant, whatever you want to call it. Is it, as you said there, it was quite a drastic change in pace. Was there anything else you noticed changed?
I think it was more so the change in pace, which was a lot slower, which is great in one hand because it allowed you to kind of get control of every aspect and really kind of give it some direction of where you want it to go. But kind of it wasn't, I guess, I even though what happened at MediaWorks, I still preferred the fast-paced life and preferred to go at a certain speed. So after about 6 months of being at Very Cheap Holidays, I had a discussion with Martin where I asked if I could, or to some degree, kind of go part-time at Very Cheap Holidays and still be able to do my role. But it was that moment I founded Biddable as a PPC agency. And in fairness to Martin, he was all up for that. Very Cheap Holidays was kind of split between being a biddable client and me working there part-time a little bit. And Martin allowed us free office space within their office to build that agency. And we built that agency to a team of, I think we had it as a team of 4. And at that point, Martin was like, you might want to consider moving out and getting your own agency space now, or at least paying the bills. So at that point, we sort of we moved out, and I kind of went backwards and forwards between the business, and kind of that's how Biddable was born. But Biddable wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for kind of Martin's support, and not just support in terms of time, but sort of support in terms of the things you need to know about running a business. Because if you've never ran one before, you don't know until you know, I guess, of all the extra things that come along with it that you just weren't expecting at the time. And Martin was great as someone just to kind of go to and speak to, and somebody who would help and support you with that. But yeah, that's kind of how Biddable came about. So I'd sort of mixed it from going from quiet and then needed to kind of go back to that kind of day-to-day kind of push it with PPC and really move on to Biddable, which eventually kind of I migrated kind of completely out of the Very Cheap Holidays business. They remained as a client throughout the Biddable journey. And then that's pretty much how Biddable came about, which was another interesting journey.
I was going to say, like, the thing that's quite, and I suppose Rich probably has more experience on this than myself. I've never founded a business, but as you say, the sort of thing where I imagine it creeps up on you where little issues will occur or something you haven't thought about, like, I don't know, like business rates. That wouldn't come in my head for 1 second. But like, I imagine you guys have seen that and gone, Oh yeah, there's a problem to adapt to. But founded a business. I think how many have you founded now? Two, is it? Circa Shoptimised
So
and
yeah,
Biddable.
Shoptimised is my second year.
Hmm. How long's that been going now, John?
So Shoptimised started in February 2018, so we're just past a little bit 2.5 years now. But yeah, sort of founding a business and sort of living that life. Well, it's it's good, sort of enjoy it, but I'm sure Rich probably feels the same. It's a roller coaster, and what we found when we were at Biddable, one great month was followed by two really tough months. So
Yeah.
at any point you were feeling on cloud nine, there was something waiting around the corner just to bring you back down to earth, and a bit of a bump. And sort of the roller coaster is always acceptable as long as that the drop is not as high as the sort of the lift that you just saw, and you kind of go like that all the way up. But that's the way it feels like. And it's kind of there's constant challenges and sort of lots of learning and lots of things to overcome, but sort of it's exciting. It's probably not for everybody, but it's great fun, if not without its challenges.
Yeah, that's it. There's, I think you're right in what you say there in terms of the whole roller coaster thing. You mentioned kind of almost week by week. I feel it's almost like hour by hour at times, where because you've got your eye on what would there be 7 or 8 different departments, something like that. You've got your eyes on those. There's always something that's good. There's always something that's bad that's happening. It's literally hour to hour. So, and I don't know if that actually ever changes out. I think you get to a point where you turn a blind eye to it or something. But it I guess the bigger you get, I always relate it kind of like branches on a tree. It's the more main branches you got, the more twigs and things are on the end of it, the more things you got to look after off the back of it. So
yeah, absolutely. And you sort of I guess you get as you learn. Initially, you probably take things in the earlier days a lot more personally.
Mm-hmm.
And then you learn to just accept that it's not personal. It's just business. So you start to develop a bit of a thicker skin. But yeah, you go through some crazy learnings. I mean, being on the agency side, I guess one of the frustrating points is always kind of invoicing and billing and getting and chasing invoices in, which it'll be the same challenges for most businesses. But sort of one of the biggest things that we had, which was completely unexpected and totally naive initially on our part as well. It was a huge learning curve. We went through that part of the business where we grew organically at Biddable. It was kind of word of mouth. It was contacts, and I mean that's where I encourage most kind of startups to go. It's the best place to go. But we reached that point where if we wanted to take it on, we had to sort of go and hire a salesperson or a team of salespeople. So we decided to sort of take that leap, and we hired a salesperson. Still think he's got a fantastic name. I'll not say his full name, but his first name was a guy called Stannis, and he was an American guy. So he came from a recruitment agency with a good recommendation. His CV had every kind of top network agency on it.
Yeah.
We're like, wow, okay. So we assumed we should never assume, but we assumed that the recruitment agency had vetted all of these companies and all the references. That wasn't the case. So anyway, what happened is we hired Stannis. He worked for us for a little bit. He signed some contracts, and we thought this is great. He signed some contracts, even though that we thought his outputs weren't very good, and he would go missing quite a lot during the day.
Yeah.
He said he had a client meeting down in London that he went down for. That we obviously you pay for his trains and his hotels and things like that as part of your cost of your sales. And then when these contracts were due to start, we tried to contact these people. We've never heard from them. We've got these contracts from these people with signatures and all that kind of stuff. And we managed to get in touch with these people. Stannis realized this is what we were doing in the moment, and then just disappeared out of the business for the afternoon. Just totally went missing. And when we spoke to these people, they'd never heard of us. They'd mentioned that they had received an email from Stannis, but had never replied to it. Stannis had forged the contracts.
Wow.
Which made no sense. We were like, well, it was never going to start. So you were never going to get commission on it. But then that kind of led us down a different sort of path of uncovering lots of different things. What transpired was we had naively given him the company card to book his train and travel. So he'd also bought himself a £4,500 watch on finance. So there was a £45 a month finance bill coming out for that. He bought himself a brand new iPhone, which he bought from my card because I left my wallet on my desk one night and went home.
Wow.
And he bought himself some various other things. He bought his girlfriend some gifts.
Oh, nice, as you do.
He strangely, this is the strangest one, is he bought himself a birthday card, signed it as somebody else, and then had it sent to his address, which was strange. That was the strangest thing he bought. And all the while he knew that if you had our card details and my card details, that we'd most likely use those cards at the office. So cards get IP tracked. So if you use them in the same place, the first time you might have to do your Verify by Visa, but after that you don't.
Mm-hmm.
So he would make sure he was in the office at 7 o'clock to go ahead and do all of these things. So it all kind of came out in the wash, and you get it all back through insurance and whatnot. And strangely, I mean, we were surprised that the police actually pushed it, and we pushed it all the way to court. And he did end up getting convicted. He's not going to go to prison or anything like that, or we're not going to get any money back from him. But our main thing was, is if we didn't push that and push it all the way through, then he would do it to somebody else.
Yes. Yeah.
And what we realised with because he would send us a lot of emails and say, I've had this great conversation with this client. What he was doing is he was going to 123 Reg and he would buy kind of like the domain staff-ubisoft.com, and he'd be sending emails and replying back.
Oh, goodness me. You'd think it'd be easier to just do his job.
Well, that's what we thought. If you put the same effort into doing your job, you would be amazing. And it was the same when we went and looked at his references. All of the reference emails were actually email addresses to domain names that he owned. So even if he had been vetted, he would have given himself a great reference. So that was a really interesting time. And kind of after that, you have to ask yourself, are you prepared to trust somebody again or not? Yeah. And we were naive and allowing and giving people the kind of carte blanche trust over cards and things like that, which you learn. But ultimately, we did keep trusting people. But that was I always use that as sort of an anecdotal story of one of the strangest things that's definitely happened to me in business. Interestingly, that guy's LinkedIn account now has nothing to do with paid search agencies. He works in the music industry, if anybody's wondering, and has always worked in the music industry according to his LinkedIn account. That was definitely an interesting one.
I'll tell you what, that is a hell of a change, and I think it leads us neatly onto something as well. We talked about business challenges and that side of things, not keeping cards out of people's hands, but more the recruitment side of things and how you develop effectively. I know that in the early days it was something that was quite a tricky pain point for ourselves here. Yeah. I know that you guys are based obviously in Newcastle, it's a bigger city. Is recruitment the same sort of issue up that sort of way?
So I think that picking up most of that question, sort of like challenges around recruitment and things like that. I guess, I mean, you guys might find the same thing when we're not located that far from each other. That the northeast is a bit of a goldfish bowl, and it's not a huge area. It's not a huge.
We're finding that more and more,
pool, if you like.
Yeah.
It's definitely improved. I mean, I've been doing this for nigh on 14 years now. It's definitely improved from where it was. I think at some point there was probably me and 4 other people that did paid search 14 years ago in the northeast. So it's definitely improved, and there are some really good people about that I have conversations with who I think there's some really kind of up and comers who are really going to do some really good things. But we kind of, I think we've used lockdown and this whole kind of crazy pandemic thing as a way to kind of reevaluate our thinking when it comes to recruiting. Mm-hmm. So we've taken to home working relatively easy. We had to make that change of we had to buy everybody a laptop. We invested in some software called Ring Central, which allows us to do sort of video chats, and everyone's laptops becomes the phones. But it's not really been an issue for us working from home. So we've during the pandemic we've almost doubled our team, but we haven't kind of fought more. We're very much just kind of opening that up to the whole of the UK. We're prepared, we don't need to physically touch our staff, so we don't need them to all be in an office going forward. So we've always had a guy who's worked for us, which is a guy called Mark Roll, who's sort of worked with me now for about 7 or 8 years, and Mark's been based out of Canada for the last 5 years.
Yeah,
and we've it might be kind of more to do with the relationship that we have with Mark, but we've never had a problem with Mark being based in Canada. Mm-hmm. He's always just done the job, and we've always just trusted he would do the job.
Yeah.
So we've sort of taken that forward, and we've made a couple more hires. So we just hired somebody just near Essex recently, We've got another new starter who's kind of coming on in Cardiff. We're going to try and take this as an opportunity to try and increase a bit of a foothold and put some guys into the European market as well. So we feel like recruitment isn't as big a challenge as it was, but I guess it'll bring a new challenge when you start hiring more people that you're not as hands-on with. Of some people we might find another Stannis, who knows. Well, at least we know what the red flags look like from that experience.
Exactly.
Do you think in terms of companies getting used to working remotely, that it's going to inadvertently drive up wages and drive up the costs of key staff? Because obviously up in the northeast, our wages, the wages salaries aren't as high as in London. But then if London agencies are kind of getting used to hiring remotely, you'd think the northeast is probably going to be one of the hot spots that they're going to be targeting with their inflated wages.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really valid point. I think there's a potential that happen, but there's also the potential that the London agencies will think, well, we can hire people in the northeast now and pay them northeast agencies. That'll help to improve our bottom line. So it could go one of two ways. I think it'll definitely help the people situated up here, knowing what London agencies are. They might negotiate for a bit of a bigger agency, a bit of a bigger income. But at the same time, by hiring somebody who's going to work from home, you're passing savings on to them. So you're not asking them to pay for petrol to come through a tunnel, to use a metro, to pay bus fare and anything like that. So there's savings on that side. I dare say our guys not working in the office are probably saving £20 to £30 a week on Greg's alone. So there's lots of savings, and there's
health benefits.
There's lots of benefits, from working from home. I tend to find I get 45 minutes extra sleep every day because my commute to work is sort of 5 yards across the landing. It's allowed me, now the kids have gone back to school, I can take my kids to school, I can pick my kids up from school, and it's a lot more easy, and I can be a lot more flexible around that, which is sort of, as a business, we've kind of moved a lot more to flexible hours. So it's at the end of the day, as long as the work gets done, kind of our feeling is, doesn't really matter what hours you're working, as long as what you need to do gets done. And if you can make that work around your family life and make everything a little bit better, I'm all for home working. So some of our team are desperate to get back into the office. Some of them prefer it that way. And everybody's different. So kind of our office is closed at the moment as we're back into some kind of temporary lockdown of rules I don't fully understand. We can't be in the same house together, but we could go to the pub, so that would all be fine. But our office is closed again. But when that kind of passes, it's optional. We have a limit on how many people are allowed to be in the office. But if people want to be in there, then they can be in there.
I find that certain departments are fine in terms of working from home. So typically, if devs are working through a list of work projects that they've got to do, tasks they've got to do, they're fine working from home. A lot of the telesales team as well, they're fine. They just get on with the job from home. It tends to be more kind of a management level where you need a lot more communication. That tends to have been where it's been lacking. So as much as Zoom and the like have been, we've appreciated those tools. There's nothing quite as good as getting four people around a desk and kind of throwing around ideas. So it's certain departments where we're just falling a little bit short, and I think that's taken the edge off us for 6 months or so, however long it's gone on for. It's just taken the edge off our kind of growth, really. I think because we're still a company where we're still we're kind of in a high growth stage, and we're still quite embryonic as a company, I guess. That's all the more important. We're kind of local PPC agencies that are kind of local to us, and I dare say they do the same thing day in, day out. Everyone knows their role. They haven't got to they're not particularly looking at new technologies and things. They're aware of what Google's doing and dictating, but they can kind of work remotely and just get on with their job. So I think certain digital companies like that have been fine. We've probably been a little bit more affected off the back of it, I think.
Okay. It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, if you look at some digital companies who are probably on the stock market, things like Slack and places like that, their shares all started to go through the roof.
Yes.
And there's lots of digital companies probably haven't been that affected by this, and it's probably made them think about their recruitment and where they they need to hire people from, and if they need to sort of have a localization. But it's affected every business in lots of different ways. Some good, some bad, some indifferent. And there's the frustrating thing is it doesn't really seem like there's a huge end in sight until we get some sort of vaccine.
It's like a gradual drift, isn't it? It feels. I don't think. Yeah, it'd help if there was an end date in sight. It'd be great. But yeah, I think things are gradually progressing. I've noticed I'm getting into lockdown COVID territory again here.
You love it.
I've noticed
love it.
there's a real hang off. There's a real standoff in terms of any kind of mention of a lockdown again. I think Europe seems to be several weeks ahead of us at the moment in terms of the progress of it, and they're not mentioning it. America just flat refused to do anything about it. I think I heard some stat where 90% of our industry was shut down, and 10% of their industry was shut down over that period. So they've used it as an opportunity to just accelerate away from the rest of the world again, I think. But I think everyone's holding off this time on it. I think it's just this localized thing. So I think everyone's set up nicely for if it happens again, everyone's kind of more aware of what they need to do.
Definitely. I mean, personally, I don't feel like the government and the economy can really afford another lockdown, and that's one of the main things they're looking at. I mean, we're already hearing the rumours that corporation tax is going to increase from 20% to 24%, and they're going to have to fill the coffers back up, and can they afford to go through furlough and again and everything else? I'm not so sure. So yeah, it does seem like they want to try and avoid that at all costs. I mean, the ironic thing is if they hadn't tried to avoid it earlier, we'd be a lot better off now and a lot less reliant on needing to do it again if we'd just done it 2 or 3 weeks earlier. But it's great saying things in hindsight. Nobody's around who's gone through this before. I think we'll have to really learn from this, because I think in our lifetime personally, especially my children, it's going to happen again. As the human population spreads more into wildlife, more into rural areas, more pandemics are inevitable. I mean, we had the Spanish flu, which was a pandemic over 100 years ago. But in the last 20 years, I think we've had, 4 or 5 epidemics?
Yeah, SARS was about 10 years ago, wasn't it, I think?
Ebola.
Yeah. Ebola as well. So they might not have hit the whole world, but the increase in rate of these type of things, it shows you that it'll just happen again. So it's a consideration for business, for governments, for educators, just people in general. I think, well, how do we mitigate it, and how do you deal with it when it happens? Because I firmly believe we'll live through at least one more of these.
Oh, agreed. I think what finally we'll push on to and get you away from the topic of pandemics and death and destruction.
I get stuck in them.
What I want to do, just to basically have a bit more on-track e-com conversation, Richard, is just chat a little bit about Shoptimised. As you say, it's been going around about 2 years, which is similar sort of time frame to ourselves. 2 to 3 years, somewhere on there. And in that time, it's been sort of a meteoric rise in the Northeast, I would say. You're working with clients like End Clothing. You've got a number of agencies on board across the UK. How's it been for you guys? How have you found that growth, and where are you expecting 2021 to take you?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess we're so head down, and we don't do a lot of marketing about our business. We don't do a lot of shouting about our business. It's probably one of the areas that we're not very good at. So we're if anything, we're a bit unaware of our rise, to be honest, which is kind of every day we're coming up with ideas and getting ourselves excited and putting those ideas into plan. I mean, it's definitely exciting. It's a really exciting business to be part of. We do work with loads of interesting clients, and we're seeing over the pandemic, we've seen a bit of a switch to probably more direct retail customers than all the agencies we work with. In total, we work with, I think at the last count, it's about 271 agencies in 13 different countries. And kind of part of the focus around the business to begin with was to work with agencies purely because we understood agencies.
Yeah.
So Shoptimised was built because Biddable had a requirement for feed optimization. And we went out and talked to all the usual suspects. And what we found is that we would either never ever get full control of what we wanted to be able to do, or B, we would almost have to give our entire management fee for that client to a company who would manage the feed and do all these things on your behalf.
Yeah.
So we kind of forced our hands to create for Biddable at the time, kind of that in-house software where we could use it for our clients, and it really just kind of span out from there. And I think one of the nice things about working with lots of different agencies, a lot of the advances we've made in the software come from all of the agencies' ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the agencies come up with different challenges, or they'll say, we can't do this on a platform, but could you do X, Y, and Z? And we think that's a brilliant idea. Go onto a board. The development team will kind of create a custom label or custom rule for them in the interim, and then that'll get rolled into Shoptimised, and then kind of go from there. I guess one of the things that really did help Shoptimised grow quite quickly as well was when Google CSS was launched.
Yeah.
Which at the time, so we were quite young when that launched. I think we might have only been about 3 or 4 months old, even. And then the Google CSS launched, and it turned into this huge cash grab by people, because you were basically, Google were offering you this, I can't even remember what the rebate was. It might have been 8% or something like that.
Yeah.
For all the money you spend through CSS, you would get it back. And lots of companies spawned overnight just trying to sell CSS so they could get their hands on that rebate business. But knowing Google and kind of what Google have done in the past, they'll give you something to get you hooked on it, and then when they're hooked on it, they'll take away any financial advantage to you or make you pay for it.
They did that years ago, didn't they? They did that about, must be 12, 14 years ago, I think. They used to do a similar thing with Google Ads.
Yeah, with Google Shopping, essentially. So with Google Ads, when it first started, you had what they called the Best Practice Fund.
Yeah.
So the Best Practice Fund was an 8% kickback on spend. So in the golden days of PPC agencies, when you could get away with charging 10% of what they were spending, and then Google were giving you 8%, as an agency, you were getting 18% of their fees.
Yeah.
And then that over time kind of dribbled away. They did the same with shopping. So when shopping launched, it was frugal and it was free. And then loads of people jumped on it, and then they turned around and said, well, it's not going to be free anymore. You're going to have to pay for it, and you're making an insane amount of money. So why wouldn't you pay for it? And with CSS, they give you the fund back, but we knew eventually that was going to get taken away. So right from the beginning, we just made the stance of saying, well, we'll not charge for CSS.
Yeah.
Anybody who signs up with Shoptimised, CSS is the free plastic toy in the Happy Meal.
I had a question to do with over lockdown. I'm not dwelling on it. Lockdown again.
He's mad for it.
They reintroduced the free Google Shopping, Frugal, or whatever they call it now. They reintroduced that back. We had a lot of kind of speculation internally about the motivation for that. Why do you think that was? Why? Because it's a huge revenue driver for them.
It is, and I still expect it will be. So in America and in France, you have what we call shopping actions.
Yeah.
So that is basically you can buy the product directly from Google Shopping. They'll take that money, they will pass it on to the merchant, and the merchant will. It's basically like Amazon Seller Central.
Yes.
And obviously, they will launch this completely free to begin with, and then eventually Google will start taking a percentage of your basket.
Ah, right, okay.
So the move to sort of free clicks, so they're only doing it on the shopping tab, and depending on the sector, the shopping tab may get upwards of 10% of all Google shopping traffic.
Yes.
So they've mitigated in a sense where still 90% of Google shopping traffic is going to be paid for.
Yeah.
They've also introduced paid ads on the shopping tab, which didn't exist before, so they can still drive a revenue from that.
Yeah.
So eventually we will see, and if you log into a merchant center now, there's a new area called partners, and within there you can already link your PayPal account to the merchant center.
Okay.
So eventually it will be the case that on the shopping tab, you will just be able to buy direct without ever leaving the shopping tab or ever entering the client's website.
That's interesting. That's a game changer for some of the e-commerce platforms, then, isn't it?
It is, and sort of kind of Facebook has stole a bit of a march on that with Instagram, where they kind of scaled that out over the last couple of months, where you can buy direct from Instagram now as well. Yeah. And it's kind of the same process. So Google, we're getting onto the topic of the four horsemen now, I guess. Google obviously look at everybody with envious eyes. Everybody looks at Google with envious eyes. So Google want what Amazon have got. Amazon want what Google have got.
Because they're almost like the gatekeepers at the end of the day, really, aren't they? Google, the way they're set up.
They are, and the way that business is going is they want to control the bid and the auction, which kind of makes it a little bit authoritarian. It takes a lot of control away from advertisers. But they look at Amazon and see Amazon as a huge competitor. So we generally don't compare or kind of say Amazon are a search engine. We kind of look at them as a marketplace. But in reality, they are still a search engine, and they are responsible for 54% of every product that gets bought in Europe.
Goodness me.
Google look at that as a huge opportunity, but they know Amazon's got more product. So Google need to increase their scale of merchants, and in doing so, they're giving you things for free now because they hope that'll encourage more people to come on and drive a revenue. And when you see that revenue, you won't mind when they start to introduce, we want 1% of your basket, or we want 2% of your basket.
Yes.
And it's the same approach that they always use. We refer to it as a digital drug dealer. They're going to give you something for free, they're going to get you hooked, and then they're going to charge you money for it.
Yeah.
And we know all businesses are addicted to profits, because that's why we're in business, and you're not going to turn your nose up at them. So that's their way of sort of bringing this over, and how they're kind of trying to take on Amazon in that respect. And Amazon have obviously got two sides of their business. They've got vendor and central, seller central and vendor central. Vendor central is you would send all your products to them, they would put it on their racking and charge you for the racking.
Yeah.
Seller central is essentially people buy and then you just ship it direct from your business. So this is almost going to be Google's take on seller central. Whether they would go as far as going to vendor central, I don't know, because that's a huge undertaking. I can't absolutely see right now Google buying loads of warehouses.
Game, is it? Yeah.
No, if they were going to do that, the perfect acquisition for Google would just be to buy Argos and the post office.
Yeah.
And you've got all your fulfillment centers right there. But this is kind of Google's attempt to kind of swing there, and they're very keen on being able to say, well, is there more money in taking a percentage of the basket than taking something off all the clicks, and looking at it that way and becoming sort of a true marketplace? Which if they do, some people will think that's a brilliant idea, but they control too many elements of it. I remember as a kid, sort of growing up, companies like this used to get broken up. It's how the water boards and BT and everything like that got broken up, because you can't control everything.
Yeah.
But Google seemed to have circumvented that, and they can control everything.
Yeah, they don't really need to acquire anyone. They don't really need to acquire delivery companies to get this monopolization, do they? They've already got control of it. They are the front end. They are the the first place that you go, really, arguably, aren't they?
There is, and there's these rumors of the Apple search engine that has been talked about at the moment.
Yeah.
If that was to launch, it would definitely change things, because if all of a sudden 1 billion devices defaulted to Apple as a search engine rather than having Google there, some people would change the default settings and go back to Google, but a lot of people would probably remain with Apple. So that could put, it's definitely a threat to Google's plans to look at it that way. As a business, Facebook are changing all the time and doing different things, and Amazon are just doubling down and growing and getting more and more aggressive.
No, I think that's pretty much comprehensive.
It falls into your hands quite well, doesn't it, in terms of the feed management, I guess. I think going forwards, everything's going to be channels, isn't it? It already is now, but it's just going to be ever more important in future.
Yeah, it does. I mean, luckily we are in a good space for these kind of changes, and we've managed to kind of make lots of assumptions on what we think Google are doing. I think sort of recently it was last week where Google announced they were pulling back on a lot of the search terms people were allowed to see.
Yep.
And they were taking that away. I was more surprised by the surprise that happened.
Yeah.
Because for me, when Google rebranded and took the words out of Google AdWords, it was, the writing was on the wall of where they essentially want to go to. And I think one of the things that Google have seen happen to them over the past few years is the rise of Facebook ads.
Yeah.
And the rise of Facebook ads has really come and taken a big chunk out of Google's display network business. And Google have taken, they've stepped back and look at Facebook and what Facebook were doing. It's all just audience driven.
Mhm.
You can see very little about kind of what is going on behind the scenes with Facebook, whereas Google Ads used to give you a lot of detail.
Yeah.
And I think they've looked at people who are adopting Facebook ads and investing more and more and more into it and saying, well, you're open to be able to see less
Mhm.
and continue to spend more in this channel. So why can't we do that?
Yeah.
And we've moved a lot more towards creating lots of different audiences now. We've got lots more in-market audiences. We can do a lot more things with feeds. And that's kind of, I think the threat of Facebook ads is almost kind of changed Google's thinking to some degree, which has pushed them slightly into a different direction. Google still sell very heavily on, you control your budgets, you control this, you control that. The message is changing really. And Google Ads is going to be more about convenience. Give us a budget, tell us the type of people you'd like to sell to, and then leave it to us.
Mhm.
Sort of become a bit more of a plug and play. But yeah, feeds is something that's, it's obviously there's gonna be a lot more reliance on feeds going forward because Google still need the data, but they pretty much just want to be able to do what they want with it at that point.
Yeah, I was going to say what you've said there it ties into, I suppose, almost Shopify's rise in e-commerce, where it's very much, as you mentioned, the plug and play side of things. If you want to get your store online, you can get it up and going in like 15 minutes or whatever to a basic shell. And obviously working to that sort of methodology is probably where you can encourage more people to do ads. And then, as you say, when they get into the swing of it, then you can up the spend. And again, as you say, John, take more of the market share that way. So yeah, I think that's...
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Shopify's seen a meteoric rise recently, and they're doing billions and billions in revenue now every year. But Shopify have also, what they've done really well is they've changed sort of the image of what they are. So I used to see Shopify as an elementary sort of entry level website.
Mhm.
If you launched a business, you would start with Shopify,
Yes.
and eventually the business would grow up and then migrate to Magento, or you build some kind of custom ASP.NET. And that's kind of changed. You see a lot of people kind of switching back the other way
Mhm.
and going to Shopify because it's improved so much and its ease of use.
It's that ecosystem they've built, isn't it, of apps?
Absolutely, yeah, and it's a lot more easier to use, and sort of one of the bigger issues more around now with Magento and sort of a lot of people that use WooCommerce and WordPress sites is there's a lot of plugins, and all of these plugins are not, once you plug it in, that they degrade, they're not updated, they're easily hacked, which makes your websites vulnerable. Eventually, your website might stop working, and you've got 20 plugins in there, and you don't know which plugin is breaking everything.
Mhm.
And that's always kind of a constant issue. Whereas Shopify have done a much better job of that. And if you want to create a Shopify app, it's quite difficult to get signed off by Shopify and go through that process. And they put a lot more kind of quality control on that. So they've done an amazing job of kind of coming up out of nowhere and not just be seen as that entry level. And obviously they've got Shopify Plus
Mhm.
now as well, where you've got sort of the major retailers like Gymshark, and that's been peppered all over LinkedIn recently about
Yep.
how well they've done, and we've seen sort of the journey of that company. And there's an agency over in North Shields as well who built that website
Yep.
for Gymshark, and kind of they've been a Shopify Plus partner, but that's been incredible to watch how that's come. But yeah, it's just sort of changing all the time. I guess one of the parts of my job, and a sort of big part of my job, is watching and then trying to make educated guesses
Yes.
on what is changing, what's coming around the corner, and what should we do as a business to be ready for that, to be able to mitigate against that. And one of the biggest questions that we now get asked from our agency users is how can they bring more value to smart shopping.
Mhm.
And obviously smart shopping is Google's taken away a lot of the control, but smart shopping results are obviously really, really good. And so if you just turn on smart shopping, you're not able to control the bids anymore. You can, to a degree, add negative keywords, but you don't have much control over it. So the agency are essentially losing control of that. But again, it kind of puts us in a nice position of the way to control it is by controlling the product feed.
Control
And
the
you can
source.
optimize the product feed and use the product feed to decide how you're going to structure that campaign and make it very strategic towards that client. And then an agency can still bring lots of value and still have lots of control.
I was going to say, I think we've hit the nail on the head there, John. That's been really sort of insightful, really good. Enjoyed it. Thank you very much for coming on.
No problem. Thanks for having us.
Been an absolute pleasure as always. Thank you very much
Thanks
for your time.
a lot.
Thanks. Take care, guys.
Bye.
Cheers.